going to say that one's live already. Oh, we're live here too. Am I live? I'm live. Oh, I wasn't paying attention. Shocking. I saw a squirrel. It went that way. Anyway, anywho. So welcome back to day 4 of Parasite Focus Week. Today we are going to talk about intestinal parasites. And we're going to talk about intestinal parasites for both dogs and cats. There will be a blog coming out that will be released later today on intestinal parasites. So you'll be able to go to drjudymorgan.com and read the blog and fill in some blank spots that we might leave after today's live. And then also in the Raising Naturally Healthy Pets, there's a whole chapter on parasites, including intestinal parasites, natural treatments, and traditional treatments. So, and then I think there's a pretty long chapter in From Needles to Natural too, on parasites. So intestinal parasites are like all other parasites. They really prey on the weak, the young, and the old. That doesn't mean that we don't see intestinal parasites in middle-aged animals, but those with a good immune system are going to do a really good job of taking care of them on their own and not getting an overwhelming infestation. By the way, yesterday on the live talking about heartworms, I was talking about the immune system and the video of the white blood cells attacking a blood parasite. And one of my team, I don't know which one, found that video and put a link to it. And I watched it again today. It's only a few seconds long. And it is just so amazing watching the immune system do its thing. And literally just, it's like an army comes in and just lands on that thing and takes it out. So really, really, really cool. Still using the kitten kind, although I have an infestation. I'm in Connecticut for fleas and ticks are bad here. I know that's probably not the talk for today. Nope. We did fleas on Tuesday and ticks on Monday. And you might want to go back and look at those because you need a multimodal approach. And with the intestinal parasites, it's a little bit of a multimodal approach as well. So for instance, tapeworms are carried by fleas. Well, if you have a flea infestation, so this person who has a flea infestation, guess what? 2 months from now, they might be seeing tapeworms on the back ends of the dogs and cats. So basically, when your dog or cat is grooming themselves and they eat a flea, if the flea is carrying the immature tapeworm, then with a lot of work, that becomes an adult tapeworm. And unfortunately, tapeworms are not picked up very well on stool samples. It is recommended that you have a stool sample run by your veterinary lab twice a year. So just collect a stool sample. You don't need much more than about the end of my thumb. Do not take 2 pounds. Your veterinarians do not need to dispose of 2 pounds of poop. So just take them a little container full. They'll even supply you with a container if you want. And you should have them checked. And you want to take as fresh a sample as possible. So if you get that sample in the morning and you can't drop it off until after work, stick it in the fridge. I know that's kind of gross. Just seal it really well. Make sure your family knows that it's not edible. Well, it is, but you really don't want to. So store it that way. Don't leave it sitting in a hot car all day. Don't pick up poop that's 4 days old. Don't get the hardest nuggets in the cat box. We won't be able to use those. They've got to be fairly fresh. So when you're scooping the box, if it's still squishy poop and it can be covered with kitty litter, that's fine. Don't worry about that. You can take kitty litter covered poop in. That's not a problem. Again, not a ton. They don't need a ton. So tapeworms, unfortunately, don't show up very well on stool samples. The way that usually they are diagnosed is because you will see what looks like little dried grains of rice stuck under the tail or on the back end of the animal or where they like to sleep. So sometimes you'll find them like on their bed or on your bed if that's where they sleep. That's really makes me a little crazy. So look for that. So just peek under the tail once in a while when you're doing your grooming. If you see those little, looks like dried grains of rice that are pretty tiny, stuck under there, that's a problem. I know that when we would have animals in for surgery, when we would sedate them and they'd be asleep, sometimes we'd see the little tapeworms popping their head out. That's really gross to see them crawling around, because they do come out crawling around and then they turn into those little dried things. But anyway, boy, I hope nobody's eating lunch or breakfast or dinner. So the other way that they can get tapeworms is by eating rodents. So like my outdoor kitties who are chasing and eating mice all the time, we're going to have to watch them for signs of tapeworms. Again, a healthy immune system, they're just going to take care of it. It's not going to be an issue. But I remember when I was a senior in veterinary college, so we're going back a lot of years, I was doing an internship at an emergency clinic in New Jersey, where I ended up working years later, shockingly. But I remember we did surgery for a cat with an obstruction. We didn't know what the obstruction was, and we got in there, and the obstruction was a huge ball of tapeworms. That's how bad the tapeworms were in this kitty cat. So tapeworms are treated with praziquantel, which is also known as Droncit, Drontal. It is also found in the pluses and the spectrum. So Sentinel Spectrum, Interceptor Plus. And I don't like deworming for tapeworms with praziquantel every month. You don't need it unless you have ongoing flea infestation. There is no need to deworm for tapeworms every month. And that's why I say don't use the plus, don't use the spectrum, use plain Interceptor. So that's how we get tapeworms. And tapeworms just basically, all these parasites rob nutrition from your pets. They can overwhelm the immune system. Some of them actually attach to the intestinal wall and drink blood, like hookworms. So if we have a severe hookworm infestation, particularly in puppies and kittens is where we see it the most, we can have a severe anemia. So if you have puppies and kittens that have hookworms and fleas, they can actually die from blood loss to parasites. And that is a very sad thing. I can tell you that in practice at the emergency services and in my traditional practice, we had puppies and kittens that needed blood transfusions all the time from hookworm and flea anemia. And you don't want to be in that position. That's a bad place to be. So if you have puppies and kittens and you have the mama, make sure the mama is healthy. Make sure you've tested a stool sample on the mom before breeding, and make sure you're checking them for fleas as well. So, okay, so that's tapeworms. A little bit about hookworms. Let's talk about roundworms, because roundworms, again, are really more a problem of puppies and kittens. The bad news with roundworms is that they can cause issues for people as well. And this is one of the reasons why we say if you have outdoor cats and your kids have a sandbox, please cover the sandbox, because we don't want them using that as a litter box. And if they have parasites, we don't want our kids getting parasitized, because the larvae of those parasites can't usually, where they like to land is either in the brain of the person or in the eye of the person. We can also get visceral larval migrans, which is a skin problem of the parasites. So we'll see them particularly in the South where it's hot and humid. Children are outside barefoot where there's parasite infestations, and then we'll get these rashes and tracks on the feet of the kids. So, okay, hookworms, roundworms. Roundworms are transmitted through the mama to the puppies and kittens, and that's one of the reasons why we see so much of it in puppies and kittens. And they can be dormant in the mama, and then during pregnancy they're sort of reactivated, and that's why they get transmitted then. And that's why when you get a new puppy or kitten, you may see in their records that the breeder or the pet store or the puppy mill, kitten mill, wherever they came from, may have started giving dewormers as early as 2 weeks of age. And that's because it's transmitted from mama. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend checking stool samples, even on puppies and kittens. Whipworms are a bigger problem. If you have a good whipworm infestation, you will get bloody diarrhea. So anybody who has chronic bloody diarrhea problems, this is more a dog problem. It's pretty rare in cats, although I did see some. If your pet has chronic mucousy stools or bloody stools, please, please, please run a couple stool samples and see. The problem is stool samples are only about 80 to 90% effective at picking up parasites, because the parasites have to be at that life cycle stage where they're actually shedding eggs, and you have to have the boys and the girls so that we're getting eggs. So you may take in a stool sample that has a very low egg count, and so it may not get picked up. And this is why with a lot of animals with IBD, the internal medicine docs will automatically deworm them just in case there's something there that hasn't been picked up. I don't personally agree with deworming when we don't need to deworm, but that is one of the reasons they do it, because they could have a stage that is just not being picked up at that point. Whipworms, unfortunately, if you have an animal with whipworms and they're having diarrhea all over your yard and they're shedding eggs, those eggs will stay in the soil indefinitely, at least 6 or 7 years, but probably indefinitely. And so the only way to clear it from your soil, because they're not subject to freezing or heat, the only way to clear it is to actually dig down about the top 5 inches of your soil and get rid of it if you have a chronic whipworm infestation. And like I said, I saw a lot of whipworm infestations in dogs that also were infested with heartworms, fleas, and ticks. So if you have that outside dog, or you know someone who has that outside dog that's tied to a chain with its doghouse or in a dog run, and they have a parasite infestation and they're on soil, that soil is going to be permanently contaminated. If you want to get rid of the problem, you're either going to be deworming a lot. And I know I'm talking to the wrong crowd about dogs tied out to trees, but I was in practice in towns where a lot of dogs were tied out to trees with their dog houses on their chain. And it was pretty horrible. But that area is contaminated, and so they keep reinfecting themselves, and so that's why you'll see these chronic reoccurrences. Giardia. Giardia is a tough one. It's a single-celled parasite, so it's not a worm. It's harder to pick up on stool samples, so they do actually special tests for that. And they can actually do an antigen test for it, where they look for presence of basically body markers, the antigens of Giardia. So there's a couple different ways to test for that. Giardia is almost always treated with metronidazole. And when we did our spooky drugs, we talked about all the bad side effects of metronidazole. If you have an animal who keeps testing positive for Giardia, you either have a resistance to the medication, and there are other medications that can be used, or you have a really crappy immune system, or you have chronic reinfection. So contaminated environment, Giardia lives in wet areas, puddles. My son had Giardia when he was 2 years old. We never had an animal with Giardia, so he picked it up in the environment. We had one family that we kept treating their dog, and after about the 5th treatment, the chart came across my desk. The other doctors had been working with them. Came across my desk, and I said, why have we treated this animal 5 times for Giardia, and it still has Giardia? This doesn't make any sense at all. As I looked through the chart, I discovered they had 3 other dogs in the house. Never had they checked the stool samples on the other dogs. So when we did, we found that the other dogs were also infected. They were treating 1. It never dawned on anybody to say, we're probably passing this parasite among everybody, and it's sort of like only treating the adult fleas on the dog and not treating the environment. You're not going to break the life cycle if you have them cross-infecting each other. So if you have multiple animals, check stool samples on everybody if somebody comes up positive. You have the option of deworming everybody in the household. Again, not a fan of treating if we don't need to, and if you do have to treat something, absolutely check a stool sample a couple of weeks after the treatment to make sure that you've cleared everything. And what we find, particularly in puppies and kittens, is they'll come in and they'll have a stool sample run, and let's say it's positive for roundworms. So we use a medication that will treat roundworms. When they bring the follow-up stool sample back a month later, now we have hookworms. Well, the hookworms were there before as well, but there were more roundworms. So the roundworms were overpopulating. Once we took care of the roundworms, it gave the hookworms a chance to rear their ugly little heads. So we treat that. They come back a month later with their follow-up stool sample, and it's like, okay, great. Those are both gone. Now we have Giardia. So sometimes there are other things lurking, and it's because puppies and kittens don't have a strong immune system. And that's why it's so important to start them out on the right diet, use things like colostrum and probiotics right from the get-go. Make their immune system strong so that they can fight these things off. Kitty cats, toxoplasmosis is a problem, intestinal parasite, and coccidia. These are things that we worry about being transmissible to people as well. And that's one of the reasons why veterinarians really harp on routine deworming. What I really hate about corporate medicine is they just have a routine schedule for every animal. 3 times a year, 4 times a year, they're going to tell you to deworm your animal. I've never had parasites in my own personal pets. Rescues that I bring in, yes. And we treat them, we get their immune system strong, and they never have them again. So there's no reason for my animals to have deworming with chemicals 3 or 4 times a year. They don't need it. So again, individual. So we have tons of natural treatments for intestinal parasites. There's a couple pages on that in the Raising Naturally Healthy Pets. I'm pretty sure I put some of that in the blog that is going live as well today. But really, the biggest takeaway with intestinal parasites is clean up your yard. So make sure you're picking up poop on a regular basis. Clean your litter boxes every day, particularly if you bring a new animal into the household, test a stool sample on the first day. I've made the mistake a couple of times where I bring in a new rescue animal and I forget and I don't think about it. And then 2 weeks later, I run a stool sample and go, oh, poo. That guy's been pooping roundworms, hookworms, and whipworms all over my yard for 3 weeks. Yay. But like I said, I've never had a problem with any of my other animals, and I did not ever dig out the top 5 inches of my soil in my acre yard. But everybody had a strong immune system, so it never became a big issue. So definitely check stool samples. That is your biggest takeaway for today. Check stool samples twice a year. Take reasonable thumb-sized pieces of stool to your veterinarian. Make sure it's fresh and only deworm as needed. Again, there are natural things you want to boost the immune system, and there are natural things that you can do, like ground pumpkin seeds, chamomile, turmeric. There's a lot of different herbal products that you can use to help cleanse the system, and that will help clean out anything that might be lurking in there. Mange and mites we're going to talk about tomorrow. Yeah, quarantine for at least 2 weeks. That's the smart way to do it. Usually my guys come from foster care, so they've already been somewhere, but every once in a while somebody sneaks in with some parasites. Okay. Yeah, all the alternatives are in this book, and like I said, some of them are in the blog today. Okay, everybody have a wonderful afternoon. It's a beautiful day here. I'm going to go try to get outside for a little bit,